Today's panel, Growing Mississippi's Economy, Filling In-Demand Jobs, will be moderated by Shay Walker. He is co-founder and CEO of Jumpstart Test Prep, a unique approach to improve ACT test scores. He learned of Dr. McClendon ACT expertise and renowned preparation method firsthand after her daughter's dramatic improvement using Jumpstart ACT. I just earlier was talking to Shay and learned that Dr. McClendon is also a former Hall of Fame teacher for the STAR program. I'm always interested in making those connections. To be a Hall of Fame teacher, you have to be selected by 10 different students, 10 separate times, to be recognized. And so she was recognized as one of our Hall of Fame teachers. In 2016, Shay began the mission of creating an online, on-demand delivery of DOT's 40 years of test preparation experience and proven techniques to the millions of students attempting college readiness, high school equivalency, educator certification and workforce certification assessments, as well as Algebra 1 proficiency and understanding. At Jumpstart Test Prep, Shay leads all aspects of the startup. He taps all of the skills that's required early in his career as L.M. Berry Company and later at Hearst Review Services, where he held senior roles. Shay received his Bachelor's of Administration in 1990 from Mississippi State University and received his Master's of Business Administration in 2017 from Millsaps College. Shay will provide a brief overview of Jumpstart Test Prep and introduce the panel.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone being here today. A little more than a startup now. We're 5-6 years in at Jumpstart Test Prep. We're in around 120 high schools delivering our prep, our review, our time practice for the ACT exam and now ACT Workkeys exam we'll talk about. Turns out your mom was right. If you spend a little time practicing and preparing for an exam, the outcome will be better. And that's what we've developed. We sell the expertise of Dot McClendon, 19-year STAR teacher, one of our state's most decorated educators, and her novel approach to rapid improvement on the ACT exam for everyone. The state is one of 18 states that provide the ACT for all juniors. No cost is provided at school. We eliminate all the barriers for this important assessment. And this is meaningful prep to help students prepare for that couldn't afford a $100 an hour tutor to do their best. So it's making a difference, it's changing lives, and now we've developed ACT Workkeys Prep, which is important to our discussion today. You may have heard ACT Workkeys now in several bills. The legislature is appropriating money for it, for high school students to take this assessment. I'll touch on it briefly. The ACT Workkeys test your ability in 3 main areas: applied math, graphic literacy, and workplace documents. Those are the 3 test areas. So it's trying to determine your skill level in those 3 areas. So for math, applied math is real world math. Can you determine the volume of a slab? Can you make basic math conversions? Can you make change to a customer? So how well you determine your skills are on this assessment enable ACT to then profile you and say, you know what, you're a great fit for this list of career opportunities based on how you've scored on this assessment. So it's opening the door to career thinking and planning for our emerging workforce, as well as our underemployed workforce. So community colleges are administering this test to adult learners and those that are underemployed to determine their skill level proficiency. And as an employer, I'd just about rather see the results of this assessment than a resume, because it gives me great insight into what a skill level for a potential applicant is, and I might consider them for a different role in our organization than I was even interviewing for, based on what I'm seeing. So it's an important assessment. We've built prep for it. It's because it turns out if you prepare for this, you'll do better on it. How many seniors have seen a workplace document? You know, they just haven't seen any of this and don't have any experience with it. But when you're presented a workplace document, we all know that there are processes and things that are described that you need to be able to understand. And an employer needs to know right out of the gate, are you going to be able to discern what it is we're wanting you to do when we provide you with a workplace document. So that's what we do at Jumpstart Test Prep. We're in Brookhaven. I'm honored to be moderating this session, which is about growing our economy and filling jobs. And that's what our business is about. That's why these three excellent panelists have joined us today. I'd like to introduce all of them. First is John McKay. John is President and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, which is the largest and most influential voice for Mississippi manufacturers and related businesses across the state. Over more than a decade with MMA, John has led the fight to reduce or eliminate burdensome taxes and regulations, develop and pass sweeping workforce development initiatives, support increased funding for critical infrastructure, and advocate for economic development incentives to grow in our state. Appointed by Governor Tate Reeves, John serves on the executive committee of the State Workforce Investment Board. John holds a bachelor's from the University of Mississippi with a double major in political science and English, and he's a master of public administration degree from the College of Charleston. John is also a graduate of the University of Oklahoma's Economic Development Institute. We welcome you, John McKay. Also joining us today on the panel is Dr. Tonya Moore. Dr. Moore is a trailblazer in the field of nursing. For service, advocacy, leadership, she's recognized as a strategic thought leader in healthcare, community outreach, and organizational development. Dr. Moore is currently serving as founder and CEO of MooreNOW, LLC, which is a boutique leadership coaching and consulting firm created to connect individuals and organizations with the sole purpose of elevating leadership learning experiences to achieve competitive advantage. We all need that. Tonya has served the healthcare industry for 27 years before retiring from the University of Mississippi Medical Center. She served a myriad of roles, including Executive Director for Leadership and Workforce Development, Administrator for Community Health Services, and Chief Learning Officer. She's received numerous honors and recognitions for her impact at the University of Mississippi Medical Center and communities throughout Mississippi. Among those, in 2021, she was selected as one of 50 leading business women by the Mississippi Business Journal. So we welcome you, Dr. Moore. And our third panelist is Michael Forster. If you heard Super Talk this morning, the two of us were dancing on the radio. So, he co-founded the Mississippi Coding Academies and serves as chairman of the board. He considers the Academies his most significant business accomplishment since returning to Mississippi and his hometown, Louisville. Mike is a graduate of electrical engineering from Mississippi State University, and he had a 24-year career with IBM, achieving the level of vice president. Then he relocated to Munich and as president of the international operations for a very large high-tech company. After 3 successful years of leadership for both the companies in European and Asian operations, he returned to the United States in 1993. Mike then led 2 software companies as CEO and chairman, taking both to successful exits for their investors. We welcome you, Mike. So, to get this started, John, I think I'll start with you.
Sure.
If you would, tell us a little bit about the Mississippi Manufacturers Association and its role it has with workforce development.
Sure. So we are a trade association that represents manufacturers all over the state of Mississippi, both large and small. Obviously, some of the brand names that we all know in this room that operate in Mississippi are major impacts on our organization, but by and large, we represent a lot of small to mid-sized manufacturers in that 20 to 100 employee range, and by far and away, and whether you ask them today or 10 years ago or probably 10 years from now, the number one issue that keeps them up at night is workforce, and finding the right people, finding enough people with the right skills to actually bring those skills to the table and help them produce the products and get them out on time and have the quality, the level of quality that we all come to expect from manufactured goods in this country. So we take a lot of pride in representing these companies, and some are in this room right here today. And obviously with workforce, it's a matter of being impactful on the public policy side. So we're very active with the legislature, with state agencies. A lot of people don't know this, but we get hundreds of millions of dollars a year sent to this state for workforce. Now, some of that is sent from the federal government, some is generated by our businesses right here that pay into a system that funds some of our workforce operations. And what we've typically not had in this state is a level of coordination of those funds and a focus and essentially a quarterback at the state level that says, this is what we need to do, this is where we need to focus. Maybe some of this other stuff that we're doing doesn't work and we need to rethink those things. So I take a lot of pride in the fact that over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've really come a long way in passing legislation and setting up systems in this state to really address those needs. And I think we're really moving in the right direction. Very proud of the formation of Accelerate Mississippi, which is our Office of Workforce Development. Those are some of the things that we really focus on, and that's, like I said, by far the biggest issue for manufacturers in the state.
So what do you see as the biggest challenge or most in-demand jobs when it comes to your organization? Obviously it really depends on geography in this state, because we are kind of segmented. Whether you're, on the coast, you're looking at more of the shipbuilding and heavy machinery and defense-related industries. Northeast, you're looking at, furniture, wood products, some of those things. But really in general, industrial maintenance technicians are always in demand, and we produce way less than we need each year. Looking forward, and you bring in, Industry 4.0 and those kind of things, which is essentially all interconnected, high-tech industrial applications, we don't have enough folks that understand the technology side to really move our industries forward on that. So whether you're talking about robotics or integrating, the plants of the future, smart plants with RFID technology, we really need our individuals and our training partners to focus on what's coming 10, 20 years down the road. That's where I think the focus needs to be, and really, and we have great training partners, especially at the community colleges. They provide some great services. We just, again, need to be very coordinated and have a plan going forward about what jobs are we trying to recruit and retain in Mississippi versus what we were doing 20 years ago. Very good. Mike, let's get you in this discussion. As technology is constantly changing, companies need skilled workers. Everyone in the room can relate to that. Can you tell us about the Mississippi Coding Academies and why they're essential in providing opportunities to Mississippians?
Yeah, Shay, thanks a lot. There's at least 1,000 open jobs today in the state of Mississippi for software developers, coders, programmers, we sometimes refer to them as. And we came up with a notion, with a nudge from our good friends up at Base Camp Coding Academy in Water Valley 4 years ago. And we said we need to take this thing statewide. And so a group of us who were serving on the board of Innovate Mississippi at the time took the ball and worked as volunteers. And God bless him, Rich Son, who recently left us, was a key member of that team. We miss him every day, and he was just an enormous attribute, a great force for us. And we simply won't be able to fill his shoes. But what we do is we recruit from high school graduates primarily, but also we have veterans. We have a veterans program. We have an evening program for those who are already employed but want to upskill. And it's all about preparing these young people for jobs in the digital economy. First of all, if there's 1,000 open jobs in Mississippi today, there's going to be 5,000 in 10 years from now. Our traditional manufacturers all need IT skilled people on their staff, and it's going to be increasingly so. So what we're trying to do is to get these young folks who otherwise, for whatever reason, aren't going to a community college, aren't going to a four-year college, and we bring them into our program, and in 1 year, we turn them out as full stack coders. What that means is they know everything from the presentation level all the way to the database on the back end. So it is an intensive program. There are three distinctive elements to it. We put them in a workplace environment. The day they walk in, there's no classroom. We have a scrum room. We have a workplace. Each one of them has a laptop. It is a learn by doing. We spend maybe 1 hour a week in lecture. The rest of the time, and they work 40 hours a week, we teach them soft skills, but guess what? We teach them soft skills by doing. Getting to work on time, working well in the sandbox, doing all those kind of things that we know are necessary to be successful. Our instructors typically have both industry as well as obviously the educational background, but we try to bring the real world into the classroom for these folks. So it's not a classroom. The other distinctive that I have to point out is employer engagement. We treasure our employer partners. They help us establish the curriculum. What are your needs? You tell us. We don't tell you. This industry moves so quickly that if you don't invent yourself or reinvent yourself about every 6 months, you're going to fall behind. So the employers provide guest instructors. They come give real world lectures to our people, tell them about what it's like to be in IT in the real world, and they also participate in evaluations of our coders, which obviously helps in terms of placement. So our colleges do a great job. We've got great computer science programs at Mississippi State, even Ole Miss, and other places. We produce about half of the graduates that would be provide the people for those 1,000 jobs. And guess what? Half of them leave the state for other opportunities. So, you know, we are at the point where we'll be producing about 100 coders a year. So we will start to make a difference over the course of the next few years. We have 4 locations today. We'll have 2 more coming online. We got great cooperation from EMCC, Dr. Alsabrooks, and the president, CEO of Coahoma. And we hope to launch there this summer. So let me stop there.
I'll ask you a follow-up question here. What are you doing to attract candidates for your program? What specifically?
We are in that process right now. Our programs run from about July to July, August to August, that kind of a time frame. So what we are doing right now is we're out working with school administration, asking guidance counselors, principals to give us insight into some of their people who may not be going to college, who would be interested, who've demonstrated skills in math or science. But I'll quickly say some of the best programmers I ever hired were piano players. There is definitely a right brain aspect to being good at this. So what we do is we actively go out and visit with the high schools. We talk to students, we talk to the guidance counselors, we elevate the awareness of our program. It is tuition free. All it requires is sweat equity, but it requires a lot of that. But by the time they've spent a year with us, these folks are ready to go to work. Bob Busick at MEMA has hired at least a half a dozen of our people, and he says the work ethic is just phenomenal. He's just tickled to death with them.
It's fantastic. Dr. Moore, let's get you in this conversation. You've got an extensive background in the healthcare industry. Can you talk about what you've seen and the role of that MooreNOW plays in highlighting careers in healthcare?
Yes, Shay, thank you for the question, and it is an honor for me to be here among you today. Gosh, how much time do we have in terms of what I've seen in healthcare? I will summarize that to say healthcare has been and will likely always be in the news. and always be top among priorities for our local communities and our states. I mean, that's clear. We're not going anywhere. Why is that? It's because a healthy healthcare industry correlates to healthy communities. We are an economic engine. For most communities that have healthy healthcare systems, we have jobs, and people within those communities live a happy job life. Now, when I looked at the Mississippi Department Employment Security Labor Force information and looked at the projections for healthcare within these next several years beyond 2018, I saw that we have at least a 10% projected growth in a lot of the job areas. When I started looking at the list is long. So I could spend time talking about the different types of healthcare jobs that are in demand. And we can talk ad nauseum about what those look and feel like. Yes, registered nurses will always be in demand, physicians, but think beyond what we always see in the media about jobs and job availabilities in the healthcare workforce. Those also include speech pathologists, they include pharmacists, they include respiratory therapy, a huge demand for respiratory therapists, occupational therapists. There are other support jobs that are also needed to create a balanced healthcare industry. Those are aides, home health aides, mental health aides, pharmacy technicians. And so I want to urge and employ everyone, when we talk about healthcare workforce, think in a broader sense about all types of jobs. Now, MooreNOW is in a really cool position that we're able to help organizations and individuals build up their talent. Build up their talent so, yes, they can achieve competitive advantage with confidence. We work closely with organizations to customize different leadership programs that fit their needs. We also work with individuals. Mentoring is huge, and mentoring starts before careers actually begin, to continue to encourage individuals to move into that field of interest. So thank you for the question, Shay.
You know, healthcare is known for paying well. I think most emerging workforce would see the healthcare industry as being a well-paid career path. What do you see as the challenge? Because it might not be the money. What would be the challenge in getting students to pursue a healthcare type career?
So a couple of things. It depends who you're talking to in terms of where pay stands with different healthcare professionals in their roles. Healthcare nationwide is very competitive, and we've heard about that in the news with nurses leaving the state to work in other areas because of enhanced financial incentive. So we do have to right-size that with healthcare workers. One of the key areas today that I see is an opportunity for employers and education systems is really to close the sale. What I mean by close the sale is to meet potential new hires where they are in terms of recruitment and retention. And recruitment has to start early, maybe high school, maybe even before that, because we have to garner the interest, pique their interest into the healthcare industry, and then we have to nurture that interest. One great model about 9 years ago when I was at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, we created, and I led that work, it was a groundbreaking work for the University of Mississippi Medical Center, a program that was called the Health Careers Development Program. That program was a partnership between the medical center and universities across the state of Mississippi. So all the IHLs, community colleges, private colleges and universities. And we actually went out to the schools, talked about healthcare careers, invited them in a formal way to come into the organization so they could gain experience with shadowing, volunteer so they can interact with patients before they were in the job. And gosh, we had tremendous success. We had students who confirmed that, yes, this is what I want to do with my life. We also had students to rethink their career choice because they realized, based on their level of exposure, that maybe this is not the right way to go for me at this time. And that was great because they did not lose time invested in college studies, etc. So there are some great areas. Along with recruitment, we have to be able to retain great talent. So the competition for talent is fierce. Everybody's pulling this great talent from all over the place. What are we doing as employers to retain that great talent? Are we developing people? Are we providing stretch assignments that allows them to understand their value and their worth? Are we seeking their input into decision makings that they actually can provide feedback in? Are we paying them? Yes. Do we have great solid work environments from a teamwork perspective? So we have to consider a lot of things. And mostly, I'll close my comments with saying it may be as simple, and I say that, nothing is really simple, as employers putting ourselves in our employees or future higher positions, asking the question, what do they really want? And when we get the right answer to that question, there might be a good model for employee recruitment and retention. Shay?
I would agree. You mentioned the student determining if healthcare is the right field for them, and it's kind of a two-way street too. It's from the employer standpoint, selecting the right candidate for the job so that we're not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. We're selecting the right person that's going to thrive in the environment that we're going to put them in, and support them with the things that you mentioned: environment, training, benefits,
Yes.
Stretching them, challenging them, and providing a rewarding experience. I couldn't agree more. And pick on you one more time.
Yeah, give it to me.
What advice would you have for someone looking for a career in healthcare?
Find somebody like me. Now, what I mean by that is I am a cheerleader for healthcare. As a healthcare executive, as a healthcare professional myself, I understand what the industry has afforded for me. And when I hear of someone who has a minuscule amount of interest, I like to build upon that. So my advice to someone interested in the industry would be find a mentor. That would be somebody like me. Find someone who's excited about their career, who's had great experiences, good and not so good experiences, to help maintain or sustain that interest level and motivation first. Second, I would strongly encourage exposure. So some professional healthcare programs require shadowing experiences. Others do not. I believe that is a really great model for people interested in health careers to take a peek at what that actually looks like. They gain on-the-job experience when they've not yet actually had an opportunity to work, but their knowledge about the field increases. Their networking opportunity expands. I'm going to go back to the Health Careers Development Program for just 1 second because I think this is very important. One of the problems back in 2003 that we saw at the medical center was we didn't have a formal process for individuals to come in and shadow. Students were able to access the system because they knew someone in the system. We wanted to make that right. Establish a program, go out to the colleges and universities, expose them so that there will be an equal and or equity process so students in general who are interested could have access to professionals and shadow them. So I think that that exposure is critical to help maintain that interest and grow the interest into a healthcare industry.
Right. You know, we'll circle back, Mike, because I'm curious about the reaction of the businesses that employ your successful candidates and what they say about your program. You know, how has that helped your whole initiative?
Well, I mean, that's really where, of course, the rubber meets the road, is how do our folks perform when they're out there. And I've referenced Bob at MEMA already. I want to make a point that I should have made earlier, and that is we're very proud of the demographics of our program. Again, my whole career is in technology. Underrepresented females, underrepresented in minorities. Our graduates, 70% minority, 30 to 40% female. Unheard of in this industry, okay? And that has been every cohort in every location in every year, okay? So we're proud of that. The second thing is their starting salaries are in the $40,000 range. That's median income for the state of Mississippi. For most of these young folks, that's the highest income in the family, okay? And again, their opportunity is to double or triple that if they keep their skills up. One of the things I always tell them is, we're not preparing you for a job. This is a career. This is a 30-year career. This economy isn't going, this part of the economy is only going to grow. So you keep your skills up and the sky's the limit for you. And again, we're very proud of that. So our employers, again, I think the best way to summarize that without naming individual names so much is to just say that once they become engaged, they stay engaged. They are back with us each year, doing those evaluations, providing those guest instructors, supporting us financially. We get support from the state. We have been blessed with that. But we've got foundations that support us. The Kellogg Foundation has been very generous to us, providing over $2 million of funding to us over the course of the last 4 years. So, and there are numerous foundations around the state and individuals as well as companies. But we want to be primarily privately funded because we are working with private companies in the main, and we think that they should demonstrate the value of what we do by investing in us, and so far that's working out pretty well.
I'd say so. John, let's get you back in this in this fire. You know, I see Colin here represented Southwest Community College, other community colleges here today. We do a lot of workforce training at community college level, and there are a lot of programs that exist in the state, and from what I understand, they're well funded. The schools do a great job of trying to get candidates into those programs. But what can you tell me about how can the Manufacturers Association ensure or try to make sure that the skills training that is going on at that level matches what is in demand?
Sure, and that's a constant struggle, and I'll circle back to one of the things you said, and I think some of the community college folks in the room might disagree with the well-funded part, and mainly because the career and technical side of training is, number one, usually more expensive because you need to have a smaller subset of classrooms. So you're training, your instructor is training 10 people rather than a classroom of 30 or 40 students.
Right.
So the cost per student ratio is a little bit higher, and I think it's similar to the healthcare industry. So that's been a struggle in the sense that community colleges themselves really have to decide to invest in career and technical education. Now, fortunately, we do have the resources through various funding streams to help them in that path. And I think just like in everything, you have some community colleges that have really latched onto that notion and gone down that road full bore and really have a robust training operation, and some haven't quite gotten there yet. And that also depends on where you are in the state and the intensity of industry in that particular area. But overall, I think they do a great job. One of the problems we've identified over the years, and I think we're moving in the right direction, is the communication between education, and in this case, in particular, community colleges and industry. And I think you referenced it too, that the partnership between the trainer and industry is critical, and they don't really speak the same language. And that's where an organization like ours, and we have something called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership as part of our set of resources, that's their main mission, is to go out and sort of translate that barrier, that language barrier between those two entities, and make sure the community college or the trainer, whatever trainer that may be, understands the actual needs. And then, another problem is, because of this constant evolution of technology, the equipment used to train people needs to evolve. Well, that's expensive. So you really have to engage industry, and again, let them have some skin in the game. So if I'm in industry and I say, well, you're not pumping out what I need, but I have this piece of equipment here that I could loan you or give you or whatever to have at your facility to train, the 10 or 20 folks I need every year to come out of that program. So it's a constant struggle, and it's something that that's the interesting thing about workforce development, and I think this transcends whatever industry you're talking about. This isn't something that you solve and walk away. It's constant, and it's going to be going on forever. We're going to be having this conversation 5 years, 10 years from now. But if we focus on the right, pathways and coordination between these entities, I really think we can move the needle. And I'll go back to something else that was said earlier, which is those soft skills. Right now, labor shortages around the state are so severe that if an employer can find an individual with the right soft skills, somebody that'll show up every day on time, drug-free, and be ready to work and work in teams and take instruction from a supervisor, that's all they need. They don't need a degree. They don't need 2 years of training on a certain piece of equipment. They don't need a certificate. They need a person who is willing to put in the sweat equity and the work, and they will train them on the job. So it's really this combination of folks around the state that are really trying to solve this puzzle, and I think we're starting to get there, but it's just going to take some time.
Yeah. We got, 50,000 graduates from our public schools this year, and soft skills are not really taught at the high school level. It's not really addressed. And, we all agree that's important factor in onboarding an employee, a prospective employee. So I'll open this up to anyone that can answer their thoughts on what are ways that we can address improving the soft skills that applicants show up with. What are your ideas on how to make an improvement there? Because we really don't have any training, so to speak, for those particular areas, and they're so critical. We all agree that's.
Yeah, well, no, I'll just say one thing, and then I'll turn it over. As a parent myself of 3 children, and I know this is cliche, but it really does start at home.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of households in this state and all over the country. We're not unique here in Mississippi. We may have it more acute. There's whole generations of folks that never see anybody in their household put in the work, and by put in the work, that doesn't mean you go to a job every day at this. It's somebody in the household that actually does something of value outside of themselves and goes out and demonstrates to the whole family, this is how you take care of your family, and this is how you create the familial wealth and the generational wealth that we have lacked, kind of as a society. And that's tough. That doesn't happen overnight. We can't, as a state, expect school teachers at the K-12 level to just do this. I mean, they're teachers. They're not social workers. They're not psychiatrists. They're not all of these things that we've tried to put on the shoulders of K-12. That's just not going to work. And we're going to have to refocus our efforts at that level. And I don't know that there's an easy answer.
If I could just add one quick comment, I agree with everything John has said, and the the approach that we're taking, which says set expectations, evaluate, mentor. When you see someone falling behind, step in with them. As Tonya's pointed out, having someone who is there to put an arm on the shoulder and do those kind of things. That kind of stuff can happen in a class of 20, I'm not supposed to say class, it's a cohort, our cohorts of 25 or 30. We do have a high-touch approach at that. And I think that we can make a difference in all of our training programs if we took a similar model to it. We are, we're blessed in this state, generally speaking, with a great work ethic. We don't have lazy people. What we have is people who don't have the skills they need to have a reasonable shot at some kind of economic freedom. And that's fundamentally what our program is about, is creating that opportunity for them. And they learn those soft skills by doing them every day. I'm repeating myself, but that's it.
I can appreciate the model that Mike is describing in terms of the direct hands-on approach with employers and these students in his programs. I also would offer a critical suggestion, and that is for us to consider how do we answer the question of improving soft skills among students when they don't have it, they don't have role models at home, probably not to reasons of the student themselves, but to their home environment. Then how can we close that gap? And that is a critical question that we all need to ponder and find the answers to.
I would agree. I'll expand on that. I'm sitting here thinking the same thing. You know, that we've got so many students that just don't have the structure. They just don't have the ability at home to gain the soft skills that we're talking about. We talk about teachers and what their role is, and teachers really are the front line for that. Any student that would be in that set. I was glad to see the teachers get a raise and more appreciation for what they do every day. But when you think about a teacher, they're holding their students accountable. They can be on time, take this seriously, encourage, motivate. A good teacher, and we've all had one, everybody in the room can think of the one teacher that made the most difference in your life. And a good teacher can circumvent some of that at-home structure that might be missing for so many of our students. So we owe them a debt of gratitude for that. We need to maybe tap into that a little bit more and let them know that this is something from an employment standpoint. It's not so much how much biology or algebra you know. It is directly tied to, can you show up on time? Can you listen to instructions? Can you follow directions? Can you work with others? And let them know the importance of that and how to utilize that in the classroom. So I would agree. Over the past couple of years, employers have struggled to find good people, and there's been a lot of COVID blockages to that. And when you think about the incentives and the government packages for employees to just stay home. And get taken care of. And we've struggled with that. And now a lot of that's going away. And so we're seeing an emergence back into the workforce. But what a question to the group is, do you see that getting better? Do you see that these unemployed or underemployed people are coming back to the workforce? We're having more to draw from? Or is that not getting better?
I'll take the first stab at it. I think you're probably right that certainly in 20 and 21, the incentives and government stimulus funding was probably one big reason that kept folks on the sideline. But I think it's really broader than that. I think you saw a lot of folks that were right on the edge of retirement when the COVID stuff happened. They pulled the trigger and they left the workforce. You're starting to see a trend of some of that. Maybe they're reconsidering, and some of them are tiptoeing back in, so there's a little bit of relief on that end. I think you had a lot of caregivers, parents, particularly women, but probably some subset of men too, that left the workforce to take care of either aging parents or young children when they had to be home from school because the schools were closed. That was a factor, and I think you've seen some of them return, some of them haven't, and that could be for a lot of reasons. One of the things that I'd mentioned that we helped push to the finish line this legislative session is some funding through the American Rescue Plan that's going to be dedicated toward additional funding for wraparound services. And by that, I mean folks that might have been in that situation and now they're at home taking care of family, but they want to get back out in the workforce, but they don't have funds for childcare. They don't have adequate funds for, reliable transportation, going down the list of reasons that might keep people out of the workforce. But these are going to be some funds available to help those folks either get directly back into the workforce or receive that 6 to 12 months of training that they need to upskill to get that position at wherever they're looking. So I think some of those things, addressing kind of the myriad of reasons why some folks left the workforce because of COVID is a big one. But again, the other thing that we really have to focus on is Mississippi's population is not growing. We can't sustain that. So we as a state really have to focus on things that are going to, increase economic opportunities to keep the folks that are here, keep them here instead of leaving and going to neighboring states. And then, recruit folks that aren't in Mississippi and have them come to Mississippi, see what we're all about, have opportunities to have a family and stay here and enjoy what we have to offer. So it's really not a one-shot deal, but several things.
Anyone else?
No, I'm listening to what John said, and I'm really listening with great intent, trying to see what I can add. And the only thing that I can add is, perhaps in terms of the numbers of people re-entering the workforce, and I've heard it coined the great return. I think we're seeing that with a few. I don't know what's driving that. Is it inflation? Maybe. But I think employers have to stay focused on that population and how do we move to meet them where they are so we can help them and they can help us as employers as well.
Yeah, I would only just say that we did see higher rates of attrition during 2021, and I attribute that to the fact that that arm on the shoulder, that hand on the shoulder was not there. We were not able to have personal relationships at the level we'd like between our instructors and the cohorts during that period of time. Praise the Lord, we're now back into full face-to-face workplace style education. We have some who choose to do it virtually, and we allow that. But it's quite frankly never going to be quite the same. Again, especially with the demographic we work with, where they need some hand-holding and mentoring and good examples and things of that sort. So we just got to keep doing a better job of that.
I think, when I consider this problem, I also think a benefit to alleviating this problem that we're seeing is rising wages, more benefits, more competitive market for the jobs that are trying to be filled, fewer candidates. So there's more of a reason, to come back into the workforce, and I think we're all faced with that. And we want to see wages rise. We want to see our people do better, and employers are willing to pay that when they're able to do more for them. So we've all heard about Accelerate Mississippi. I'm sure everyone in the room is familiar with Accelerate Mississippi, and they're working to inventory the jobs that exist in Mississippi and the demand for roles in Mississippi. How important do you think this work is? I mean, are you familiar with their endeavor, and what do you think the result would be?
I'm very familiar with Accelerate, simply because I sit on that executive board of the SWIB, and we were responsible for actually going out and finding the first director of that office, Ron Miller, who has been there about a year now. And I do think that's critical. And again, I think I view Accelerate as that kind of quarterback position in the state, and it's something that we've lacked. Not for any nefarious reason, but it's just because of the systems and the way they were set up. We just had, the siloed effect of, community colleges and IHL and K-12 and industry, and we never really crossed all that together. And that's the role of Accelerate. And I think as we move forward, whether it's additional funding or more sort of mandated coordination between those entities, I think it's really going to pay off because, like I said, instead of having all of these efforts going on simultaneously, and, since I've been at MMA, it's been my frustration that we have a great idea, whatever sector it is, whatever training it is, we have a great idea and we do it for a couple of years, funding sort of dries up, and then it goes away. And about a year later, somebody else has a great idea. It was the same idea. And we just do it again. And we don't coordinate, and we do it over here, and then we might do it over here, and it just has never worked. And so to have an entity not only help coordinate the actual efforts, but then go back and analyze, did it work? Did the people that would go through the training, did they have better paying jobs? Did they, increase the wealth and aptitudes of their family? All these things that we say we want, you got to measure them. And unless you actually measure them and hold people accountable, and it's not saying, oh, you did a bad job. It's, well, that didn't really work out according to the numbers, so let's just not fund that anymore and let's try something else. It's not a punitive approach. It's really best practices. What's working? What are we going to invest more in? What are we going to stop investing in and move in a different direction? And I think that's going to benefit everybody. It's going to upset the apple cart here initially, but I think that's probably a good thing.
Me too.
I would just add that we are absolutely excited about Accelerate Mississippi being there. Ryan Miller is a supporter of the work that we do, but having one place to go in terms of coordinating state support for the work that we do, it's just going to be so much more efficient for us. And we want to have a relationship with every community college that has an interest in a coding academy. We want to work with our four-year universities. USM's got a great program. By the way, Dr. Sarah Lou, who heads computer science down their department, is on our board. And Sarah is a great interface for us with all the educational institutions in the state. So we look forward to working with Ryan and with Accelerate, and we think this thing could scale and should scale to 6 to 8 locations around the state, maybe 10, and we ought to set a goal that we can produce 250 to 300 coders a year within the next 3 years. And let me tell you what the downstream impact of that. Take that $40,000 going to $60,000 and forecast that over 5 years and look at the downstream impact on the economy, and it's 5x for a job in technology. We will move the needle for the economic engine of the state of Mississippi if we do that, and that's our goal.
Your model it seems like it needs to be employed in other areas. When I look at your private-public partnership that you've developed, how can we do more there? How can we, I jotted this question down, just build these kind of partnerships to utilize workforce training funding better? Has anybody got you've obviously thought about it because you're in one area of coding, but this seems to be a model that's working. How can we develop more of this in the state?
Well, I do think that Ryan and his organization can play a vital role here. There are wonderful ideas out there, and I love John's comment about how we have a great idea and we sprinkle enough water on it to get it to bloom one time, and then we kind of forget about it, and then we reinvent it again. We do tend to silo a lot in this little bitty state. If we could just put all the wood behind the arrow on 3 or 4 really fine programs, good gracious, what a difference we could make. So I'm getting
No,
I'm getting stuck.
it's exactly where I'd like for this to end. We've
I
got
don't
just
feel strongly about this, by the way.
I see we've got just a few more minutes left, and that's exactly where I hope this would end. We're talking about real ideas that we could employ to make a difference. And as we conclude, please give me your thoughts on any other ideas that we can move the state forward.
Yeah, so I feel very honored to be here today, and I've heard a lot of nuggets that I plan to even take back to my clients to see how can my clients who are looking within their companies for great talent to promote, but also they're interested in bringing new, fresh talent into the organization. So my question to my clients would be, are we in the schools? Are we partnering with the education system to have a hands-on approach and show them what we need them or how we need them to function when they transfer into our environment? So that's one, the increased collaboration among employers with educational systems, I think is something that should stay top of mind for each of us. Healthcare, and I'll speak on that, and Ryan is a friend of the healthcare industry. So I've worked with him closely, and so I'm excited about what he will do with Accelerate Mississippi and how he would keep healthcare on his top of list of industries to consider as well. But healthcare is, again, the cornerstone of strong communities. And I want employers who are not very knowledgeable in the healthcare industry to make new friends, learn more about what we do, learn more about the impact that we have across communities, collaborate, engage with each other to have community-type events that bring healthcare and private entities together. That also increases exposure. I'll end on this. Talent, talent, talent. We have to be proactive in developing our now talent as well as our future talent.
Couldn't agree more. John, any concluding thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just sort of leave it with this, and it's really sort of setting the expectations. I have very high hopes for what we've done and what the trajectory we're on, but this is going to take a long time. Like I said, it's going to be a constant and improvement model that we're going to be going down the road, but we need to look at every opportunity to reinforce the folks out there that are trying to get into a quality field. And I see my friend back there, Bradley, whether that's corrections. We've got a lot of folks that are getting out of the corrections system, and we're responsible for them one way or the other. So we are going to either pay them to train up and get a good job, or we're going to pay them to put them right back into the correction system. It's one way or the other. So we need to look at that. Our returning veterans have incredible skills that they've learned in the armed forces, and sometimes they get back to civilian life and they don't see a clear path. We need to make sure they don't fall through the cracks. Our young people, our current workforce that is looking for an upskill or more opportunities in their professional life. All of these scenarios are all very different pathways, but they're all very important, and they lead back to the same goal. So I would stress, and I know a lot of folks in this room are very much involved in this process, let's just all take a team approach and stay coordinated, support Ryan and his efforts, and hopefully we can really move the needle.
One more thing?
One more thing.
Sure.
We're about to graduate 50 young folks, certificate I should say, 50 young folks within the next 30 days. They're all looking for jobs. You've all got jobs. And for those of you who are employers who have maybe heard about our program for the first time, reach out to me, let me know, get engaged with us, help us. We need your support to keep this program evergreen. And we got some great young people that are ready to go to work for you right now, okay?
All right, Shay.
Any of those down in Brookhaven?
Sure.
Any of your graduate schools in the Brookhaven area? Well, we got to move them down there.
We actually have a cohort down in Biloxi now, and we could probably convince them
Stretch
to move
one out.
north just a little bit.
Good. I think we all can agree after today's discussion, the struggle is real.
Yes.
We've got a lot of problems to work out, but there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and I've heard many of them today. States making the right investments to move us forward and to try to connect potential employees with employers that desperately need them. So I want to thank the panel today. One more?
Yes,
Dr. Moore?
I'm sorry. I wrote this down and I did not look at my notes. I think this is very important for me to leave on your hearts and minds. But as we think about exposing students to health careers, adequate representation within employers is essential. And that is essential at every level of an organization. People go to jobs when they see people in roles that look like them, okay? And so we need to diversify our frontline employees, our middle management, as well as our executive level leaders. And that is my final thought.
Very good. Well, again, thank you, panel, for your expertise and participation today, willingness to share your thoughts and ideas on how to move our state forward. Could we give a round of applause for that? That'll conclude